Your financial life can learn a ton from superheroes.
It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Brian, I am excited about this show because I love movies. One of my favorite pastimes is to watch movies. And I think, if you've been a movie fan for any of the past decade, there have been some really good superhero movies, which I know give a nod to your childhood. I'm excited we're going to be able to talk about a few of those today.
There's an entire category now of superhero movies. And this is one of those things. We actually have a history of covering superhero topics. And I don't know if it's just because I love dressing up and I have a whole closet full of all of your favorite neighborhood superheroes that I love when I go to theme parks and other things, or if you see me at the airport, I very well could be wearing these. But guess what? Bo is having his best day ever because one of the funnier historic things of the Money Guy show is that you guys know we've done this superhero series where I was Batman, Bo was the boy wonder, Robin. And I always felt a little bad, especially when brand new clients or people would come do the tour and they're like, so he's Batman and you're Robin. And they just have this chuckle probably because they see his biceps and the width of his shoulders. I don't know. There's a slight chuckle like, isn't that ironic? And deep down, this was bothering Bo.
It was. It had a little bit of a
best
complex.
year ever, 2022. Now because Spider-Man opened up the multiverse, we can have two superheroes in the same room so you can see we're different versions of Spider-Man now with our shirts, our sleeves. Congratulations,
Thank you
Bo.
so much. Now you can see it's no longer Batman and his trusty sidekick. It's just different universes of the same person. I like that. It makes me feel a lot better. And it's good to not be, frankly, it's good to not be Robin anymore.
By the way, he's a famous anti-hero. I found out Red Hood, my daughter's into all the anti-heroes. He's actually a pretty popular character. We're giving Robin not his due.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
We'll keep going because I don't want to take us down that nerd alley that I was about to go down. But it is one of those things where we have curated some of the key clips, and we want to talk about what are the financial concepts you can learn from some of these key scenes.
And so the very first one we're going to bring up, if obviously we are dressed in costume, it only makes sense the first clip we bring up would be a Spider-Man clip. Maybe you guys remember this if you are a Spider-Man fan. And Brian, you were telling me a little bit about the quote we're about to share. It was something, it turned out to be a bigger thing than I think we recognized at the beginning, right? Like it kind of was riddled all throughout the universe, yeah?
Well, this is one of those origin quotes that even if you go outside of the movies, this comes back to the comic book series. You can even find full-on blog posts about this quote and then how often this is showing up within the Spider-Man franchise or brand. So this is powerful. I love because we went way back. We went all the way back to 2002.
All right, here we go.
But just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
So did y'all hear it? The quote was, with great power comes great responsibility. This is the 2002 when Tobey Maguire was Spider-Man and Uncle Ben is giving the advice. But here's the thing. This is not only when it comes to superhero life. This is also your financial life. So many things, the more success, the more wealth, the more resources you have, guess what? More weight falls on your own shoulders.
Well, I think it's really interesting. We all sit around and we daydream about being wealthy and having resources and having financial independence and having a higher income. And we always think about the pros of it. We always think about the benefits and the good things. Very rarely do we think, oh, wow, with that quote unquote power, there is additional responsibility that comes in the financial realm associated with that.
You just pulled the whole mo money, mo problems
That's
type
exactly
quote.
right.
So, but here's the thing I think is interesting. A lot of people know we give the guidance. You can count your employer match on the 25% contributions you're making if your household income is under $200,000. And people are like, why? Why did you choose that number? We wanted to show you kind of, once again, we're doing origin stuff with Spider-Man franchise. Why not show you the origin or research on why we talk about savings rates and employer based upon income? It all ties back to Social Security showing, like, if the more money you make, the less you're attached to the social safety net of the government.
Yeah. So what this shows, if you're out there in podcast world or listening out on iTunes or Spotify, it shows at different income levels how much Social Security will replace of your income when you get to retirement. Well, as you can imagine, as your income increases, as the numbers get bigger, Social Security replaces a smaller and smaller percentage. So what that means is you are on hook for the rest. So if you're someone who has a higher income, and with that higher income, you have become accustomed to a higher lifestyle, nothing necessarily wrong with that, the responsibility for being able to replace that lifestyle is going to fall more on your shoulders than someone trying to replace a lower income lifestyle in retirement.
And it doesn't just stop with retirement. Think about this. The higher you go on your success factor of making more money, it's going to be harder to replace that job or that income stream if it dried up on you. So it goes beyond to even include emergency reserves.
Sure.
Instead of having that low 3 months, maybe you need to be closer to 6 months and even beyond, even a full year if you're self-employed or an entrepreneur. Remember, really do respect, with power comes great responsibility, and it even goes beyond the emergency reserves.
Yeah, so even if you're somewhat, maybe you've reached an income level where now one of the members of the household can stay at home. Well, now there's an additional burden that not only are you saving for your retirement, now you have to save for the retirement and well-being and obligations of the other members of your household, whether that be a spouse or children. So there's a chance you might need larger life insurance, more protection in place there. There's a chance that you might need more disability insurance. If something were to happen and you were no longer able to work, you might need more income coming in to be able to make sure that your family can still count on something to be able to pay the bills and keep the lights on.
But let's talk about the financial mutants, because there's a lot. We just did a tour yesterday. I got so excited. Went home, told the wife, I was like, we did a tour today and brought his sons up. And he had started listening in 2006.
Yep, one of the OGs.
Really powerful about that is that he had found us just a few months, like I think he said 6 months after graduating college, getting in his career, started listening to our content. And now he's like super successful. I mean, I'm talking 7-figure successful. And it is one of those things, and that's the abundance cycle fulfilled in the fact that you come, learn, grow, apply this. You will reach a level of success. You will be a financial mutant to the point that you start recognizing, hey, as I've built up these 7 figures of I'm the CEO of this now big financial entity, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what my blind spots are. When I lose 10% on $1 million, that's $100,000 versus when I lose 10% on $50,000, that's $5,000. There's a huge difference between those things. Instead of it being a month's worth of income, now we could be talking about years worth of savings that I've lost out on. We talk about all the time. It's good to recognize that maybe you need to take the relationship to the next level and have a co-pilot with you as well.
Yeah, because at higher asset levels, there are other things that you might need to think about, like a more robust estate plan. You know, maybe you're not worried about estate taxes per se. You're not over those thresholds, but maybe you're worried about, man, if I have kids that are 16, 17, 18, early 20s, are they in a position where they're going to be able to inherit this wealth well? Or maybe from an investment standpoint, you've been following our advice and you've been using target retirement funds and they've done a great job to you up until now, but your tax situation has become more complicated. You have different types of accounts and you can benefit from asset location. As your assets get larger, as your portfolio gets bigger, you have to start thinking about all of these things. Again, with that power comes additional responsibility to figure out how to navigate it well.
I love this transition, Bo, because this is one of those things where we talked about great power comes great responsibility. That kind of, to me, means success And I think a lot of people in this consumer world we all live in, we think, you know what? The wealthy, they show what they got. You know, the richer you are, the more you should drive the fancy car, live in the big house. Let's kind of explore this with a clip that's out there.
Yeah, this is another clip. This is from the early 2000s superhero movie. And this is a clip. Maybe you don't remember it, but I bet you have heard some piece of this saying, some piece of this thought in the past.
The next time you feel like showing off, don't.
The next time you feel like showing off, don't. This is very wise words from Charles Xavier, also known as Professor X, telling some of his folks, some of his other mutants, I guess, hey, just because you can show yourself off, just because you can do something, doesn't mean that necessarily you should be doing that.
Well, I mean, think about this. I mean, I know I had this vision when I was 16, turned 25 to go buy the Corvette, had all these goals and dreams. And then what's funny is you reach these points and you're like, I don't want that.
I don't want a Corvette anymore.
So the reality is the more success you have, I think you'll find that those tokens, those trinkets, don't really have as much value because you don't have to fake it. You don't have to try to pretend. I mean, think about when you go to Vegas. If every one of the big mega resort casinos has a mall attached to it and they have all the luxury brands there, is that all rich people in there buying that stuff? No, or is that all the people who come in there happen to get a little lucky and blow it on some of these brands because they perceive that's what they're supposed to do when they get a little bit of extra money. Now, Bo, you actually knew who this gentleman was in this clip, and I thought this was profound. So kind of set this up because this is exactly what I'm talking about on the power of stealth wealth. Yeah,
it was interesting. I was on the internet the other day, and I saw this clip come up, and I recognized this person. He's a musician who's been around for a long time, and he was talking about something so interesting because, you know, my wife will often say to me, we'll see someone who's driving a really nice car, someone who has a really nice house, and she'll say, oh man, that person must, you know, they must be really, really wealthy. And I remind her that like really nice things are not a sign of someone who has money. It's a sign of someone who has the ability to spend money, right? It's very, very different. And so we found this clip and I thought this was so appropriate. I thought it fit so well that we want to share. This is from Bun B, who is a famous rapper talking about another musician.
Jay-Z is getting richer and richer, and he's wearing less and less shit that look rich. Does anybody notice that? Hov is the one that's taking these meetings with other wealthy people. And you keep going in these rooms with these people trying to look like money. No, you got to sound like money and think like money.
My God.
Because all that is a bluff to these people. Wealthy doesn't have to prove to anybody that they're wealthy.
Oh, I love that.
I mean, I think that is so. I wish I'd have said it. I mean, I don't know if I need the crow sounds because he's obviously using some adult
by the way,
language there.
Fantastic editing there, Daniel. Thank you so much.
But it is the what he's saying is if you can catch it, speaks volumes about what we're always talking about with stealth wealth and other things. And think about, there's so many memes out there of these young billionaires and they're in their hoodies. They don't have the fancy watches. Their tennis shoes look like they're falling apart. You're like, why do they look like they could live under a bridge and be comfortable versus everybody you see at all the designer stores and all driving the luxury brands? How is it? There's a disconnect, obviously, with what's presented to the reality of what we live in once you actually have $1 billion.
Yeah, he said you don't need to try to look wealthy. You need to sound wealthy, know what you're talking about. You need to think like wealthy people think. And one of the ways that wealthy people think is not this show off style. It's not this, hey, look at me, look what I have done. We say this all the time, Brian. It is much cooler being wealthy than looking wealthy. Yeah. Because looking wealthy can put you in a bad spot because it's just like you said, you fake it until you make it. When you really peel back the curtain and look at folks who actually have means, have had some success, have been able to build wealth, I think it looks very different from what society's view and picture of wealth actually is.
I thought it was interesting because in that, I know everybody out there watching or listening on the podcast can't see that the video clip that we just played also showed him in a room with Warren Buffett and other big money players. And I think back to the whole Warren Buffett documentary that was on HBO, and they showed Warren Buffett's daily habit of he goes through the McDonald's drive-through, gets an Egg McMuffin, value meal. When we had Clark Howard on, we got completely harassed by him for putting him in a nice hotel. The first thing he said he was excited about is he was in walking distance to McDonald's, so he could go get his Egg McMuffin in the morning. It is amazing how wealth doesn't do what you think it would do, because we're being sold a false bill of sale on being a consumer. Go ahead and burn through the resources that you get with your labor versus, no, you actually could be a builder of something pretty incredible. Yeah,
there was a great book that came out in 2009 called Stop Acting Rich, and they kind of walked through what are some of the consumer habits of millionaires, and we just pulled a few that we thought were interesting. Now, again, this is 2009, so factor in inflation, it was over a decade ago, but on average, millionaires only spend about $16 on haircuts. They're not out getting like super, super expensive haircuts. 4 in 10 millionaires own a bottle of wine under $10. Brian, I fall into this category, actually. One of our favorite bottles of wine is a very, very inexpensive bottle.
I'm drinking that $2 Chuck.
That's right. That's the kind that comes in a box in a bag.
Or whatever.
And they spend about $31,300 on automobiles. They're not out there buying $100,000, $200,000 supercars. They're buying very reasonable, very logical automobiles. And so what you can see is even though millionaires have the ability, they could go out and buy the Corvette. They say, you know what, maybe I don't need that. If that doesn't bring me utility, if that's not something that actually is part of my why, part of my goal, I'm not going to pursue that.
So, but we could double these numbers. I mean, because this is 2009. Sure. You could double these numbers to bring it more relevant, because I think 32 on haircuts, 20 for bottles of wine, 63,000 for the car. You're still having a very similar discussion. And by the way, tell me you're from South Atlanta without telling me you're from South Atlanta when you brought up my Corvette, because that's we're both from South Atlanta. But it is, it is to the point of on luxury brands. You don't have to fake it.
That's right.
I mean, and that's the big thing that I think is important about this. Figure out what makes you happy. And then here's what I want to talk about. If it's not about consumerism, if it's more about this stealth wealth, because we know true wealth you can't see, because it's working in the background. It's helping you. So you, instead of trading your labor for, the ability of you're taking your time and labor to create money. Now your money's working in the background, your army of dollar bills. We've actually created a great resource to help you kind of figure out how are you doing, to keep score, to keep track, to know what changes are going on in your financial life. So I would encourage you, go to learn.moneyguy.com. We have a net worth tool so you can see how well that stealth wealth is growing in the background, so that when you're in the room with Warren Buffett in the future, you'll know whether you belong or not.
And what I love about this is if you start tracking your net worth every single year, it 100% will start informing the decisions you make, because you start thinking, oh man, if I'm going to buy this automobile, do I really want the expensive one that's going to be worth 70 to 80% less next year? Or do I want to buy a more reasonable automobile and go max out my Roth and go max out my 401k? And as you begin to see that start taking shape on your net worth statement, we'll see our dashboard, we have a journey to abundance showing how you're building towards financial independence. It is amazing. And I think it can be transforming in how you approach making money and financial decisions.
That's great.
But we know money and financial decisions aren't the only thing. There are more things in life than money. Money is not a goal. It is a tool to help us reach our goals. And so this next clip, Brian, we talked a ton about this one, because I think a lot of very wealthy and a lot of very successful people end up messing this one up, and I think they have a little bit of remorse about it.
Well, we get a bad rap. I think a lot of people think that we're all about that miser lifestyle where you don't actually get to build memories and that great big beautiful tomorrow until you're like old, decrepit, and you're worried about breaking a hip instead of building memories. That is false. We are very big on talking about, look, pay yourself first, respect discipline and the deferred gratification that goes into living on less than you make so you can have some money working for you and saving. But we're also really big on telling you to slow down, enjoy the memories of each decade, and focus on memories more than things. And I love this next clip because the setup on this is, if we think about Tony Stark.
Oh, yeah. One of the most
Iron
successful
Man,
people.
he is, the whole Stark brand is built off of success. And, and if you watch, I'm trying to remember, this came from the Avengers Endgame 2019. Tony Stark had the opportunity to go back in time and be in the same scene with his father. So there's a little bit of irony in the background because you have two super successful people, father and son, and how they interacted.
All right, let's check out the clip.
I thought my dad was tough on me. And now, looking back on it, I just remember the good stuff. He did drop the odd pearl.
Yeah? Like what?
No amount of money ever bought a second of time.
Smart guy.
No amount of money ever bought a second of time. That is so, so true. And I think so often we get caught up in this idea of chasing the next promotion, chasing the next milestone, chasing the next thing. And sometimes we forget, maybe I am trading my time in a way that I should not be trading my time.
Well, and I think it's because I try to get younger viewers and listeners excited about the fact that, you might not have money. I mean, we come from very humble beginnings. I know in your 20s, you're not exactly rolling in it. The majority of people are not. But you are a billionaire. You're a billionaire of time. And this is something that I think people sometimes overlook, how valuable of a resource they have. They're just not utilizing it well.
Yeah, we have a resource. If you go to moneyguy.com/resources, we talk about all the time that for a 20-year-old, $1 can turn into $88. That's why we even have this koozie right here that says this $1 beer cost me $88. But then we show as you age, your wealth multiplier, the power of your dollars decreases. Well, the same thing is true as it relates to time. Brian already said, for 20-year-olds, you are a billionaire in time. When you're 20, you have about 1.8 billion seconds relative to the average life expectancy. But as you age, that time starts decreasing and decreasing and decreasing and decreasing. And that's not to be a morbid thing. That's not a thing to make you sad or upset. It's a thing to remind you, man, if I screw something up financially, I have a chance to go back and fix that. I have a chance to go kind of redo that. If we screw up our time, we often don't get chances to go back and fix that. So while we can't control what has happened in the past, or maybe ways we have squandered, we do get to control the seconds moving forward. We do get to control the decisions that we make and how we utilize and spend our time moving forward. And we can make sure that we're actually spending it on the things that truly matter, the things that really do yield a life return, not just a dollar and cents return.
Yeah, when we talk about the saving 20 to 25% of your gross income, that's not to inhibit or keep you from building memories. It's actually to free you, because once you pay yourself first, now you can not feel guilty when you make that next incremental decision to go on that trip with the family, buy things for the household. You've already taken care of the big things. Now, I think I always love whenever we can find an example, a story, a quote that gives great context and perspective. And I think about Boone Pickens. T. Boone Pickens is one of those people where he won the game, essentially. I mean, he's billionaire, made it in energy and entrepreneurship, and he had the opportunity to give it a commencement speech. And this ties into something I saw on I think I saw it on Twitter, Bo, where somebody had posted, hey, would you rather be a multimillionaire at 60 or would you rather be 25 years old?
So without not a multimillionaire, just be 25 years old.
Yeah, just be 25. So it's basically what's more valuable, being wealthy or having lots of time. And majority, I want to say it was around 2/3 to 70% of the respondents chose 25. Yeah. And then, so I'm going to just let you read this quote from T. Boone Pickens, because I think it encapsulates this even better.
Yeah, so he's talking about giving a commencement speech, and he said, I'd always offer these future leaders a deal. I would trade them my wealth and success, my 68,000 acre ranch and private jet, in exchange for their seat in the audience. That way, I told them, I'd get the opportunity to start over, experience every opportunity America has to offer. It's your shot now. So even with all of his accomplishment, all that he's done, all that he's built, he said, you know what? I would trade it again to go back and have the time over, to be able to do it again, to be able to experience it again. And I think that's really interesting for all of us who are sitting here thinking about wealth, thinking about the future, thinking about what the end game looks like. I think it's kind of helpful to realize that, yeah, the journey is part of the process. We should enjoy the journey too. It shouldn't just be about the finish line. It should be about the race that we get to run.
I've already shared, focus on building those blossoming memories. Because even if you're doing things, I always talk about the bedazzled basic life. Like I even remember in my 20s, my wife and I, before we had children, went over to Italy. We did it so cheap that, we were looking for ways that we were getting ripped off. We were breaking luggage, dragging it down the cobblestone streets. All those things that were extremely stressful now are spectacular memories. So even the chaos of loading up the SUV to go down to the beach with the kids, and I'm sure the messy middle that you're in right now, that stuff is so important. And it all ties back to the why. Because I always think about the life lesson that I look back on my own childhood. If you can really have honest discussions with yourself on why do I do stuff? What makes me happy? How does this all intersect and work together? I really learned a valuable life lesson in the fact that my father got laid off in his mid-40s. Family was poor. They bought $1,000 fixer-up jalopy-type car because they just couldn't afford anything else. But I look back on my childhood, those were some of the best memories of my childhood. I'm sure my parents thought it was just a complete stress case during those 4 or 5 years. But for me and my brother, I loved that my dad was always around. I loved the hokey vacations where we're going to timeshare presentations, so it would be a free vacation. Memories are more valuable than stuff. So make sure you understand your why. Go through those exercises for yourself so that you can really get busy spending more time on the things that give you fulfillment and happiness versus the stuff that you think others want to see you have.
And what I do, one of the things that helps me is I do a sort of a self-assessment, right? And this is because I've had great mentors in my life encourage me to do this because I am sort of motivated and driven and all those things. I have to be self-aware. Am I moving the goalpost? Do I find myself saying things like, if I could just get my salary here, then. If I could just get my net worth here, then. If I could just get my assets here, then. If you keep saying those sort of things, take a step back and say, okay, what's my why? What's the real goal? Why do I want my salary to be there? Why do I want my assets to be there? And is that why something I can start leaning into right now today and sort of bedazzling this basic life instead of only thinking about that future, that thing that's going to happen tomorrow?
That's great, Bo. I want to kind of transition to the next point. I think a lot of us, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves in the fact that we think we have to get everything right. And the good news I have figured out about success is it doesn't require perfection at all.
No.
It's even one of those things where, what is a Hall of Fame baseball career? It's like 300 on batting average.
3 out of 10, you make the Hall of Fame. That's it.
Finances are not too far from that. You can make a lot of mistakes and still come out on the finish line in a really good place. And, and I feel like, is this the second or third clip we've used of, I always want to call him Jean-Luc Picard because, it's a big Star Trek Next Generation nerdy fan in college. Friends be out hanging out, doing homework and stuff at the library. I'm watching Star Trek Next Generation. And, but the same actor plays Charles Xavier from X-Men Days of Future Past. And I thought this was a good quote that kind of ties into that thing that realizing the game of finances, you're playing horseshoes. You're not having to hit the bullseye every time.
All right, here it is.
Just because someone stumbles, loses their way, it doesn't mean they're lost forever. Sometimes we all need a little help.
So just because somebody stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean that they're lost forever. I think that a lot of times, and we see this, one of the beautiful things about YouTube is that it opens up our content to a huge, wide audience. But it always gets so sad when the folks are like, oh, I hear what you guys are talking about, but I can never do that. Or, oh, I made this mistake. Or, oh, I'm too old. Or, oh, fill in the blank. I don't know that that's always the case. Just because you might not have been on the right path the whole time doesn't mean that you can't get back on the right path and redefine what that path for you looks like.
Yeah, I mean, so a common one, Bo, is, and you just said it, you alluded to it, is I missed it. I missed my window. You guys are always talking about the power of compounding growth. 88 times over, a dollar can turn into 88. But I'm 35, I'm 40, I'm 45. I guess that I just failed at this. But that's not the case.
Not the case at all. So one of the illustrations we've done, you've seen this before, is why do we love the 25% savings rate so much is because it can give you options. So if you are a 20-year-old and you start saving 25% of your gross income, and let's assume that it increases at about 1.5% per year, and your goal in financial independence is to replace 80% of your pre-retirement income, you would likely have the ability to do that by age 49. But if you're someone who doesn't start till 30, maybe you didn't start, in college, maybe you had to get out of school and things were tight and you were graduated into like a crazy housing market and into a crazy inflationary time and it's 30 before you get started, you are still on track if you can start saving 25% to be able to reach financial independence and be able to replace 80% of your income by age 59.
And realize this was written with the assumption that you're starting from a standstill, zero, a big fat zero, which is just not the case. A lot of us, start working jobs, money's getting put in, or you got excited one year and did a Roth. Money is probably, you're not starting at zero. And we also realize we use very conservative assumptions in this because we wanted this to be motivating. The window of opportunity, the doorway, the gateway is huge. The threshold to get you there. Don't get nervous and think that you've lost your chance. You really can do this. And that leads to my second thing that I think people make mistakes and that you can overcome this is that they overthink their investments. They don't understand this whole yin-yang relationship of fear and greed because we are our own worst enemy when it comes to being a good investor because we either get greedy when things are good or we get scared when markets are down. And then let's not even forget we're in this new modern world with all the social media, the TikTok videos that we're debunking left and right, where they're telling you, you know what? This thing is scary. There's a lot more to this. But one of the first things I think about is we've done some of these TikTok videos. And they always talk about the ups and downs of the market. And that makes me think of the visual we've used before of the cycle of market emotions.
Yeah, we all go through this. As investors, no matter where you are, we go through these periods where things feel really good, right? The markets are making money, your accounts are growing, you can't believe how much your wealth went up. And you start thinking, man, I am smart. I've got this figured out. Things feel really great. And then something changes. The tides shift and we start getting uncomfortable and we start getting a little anxious and we start getting a little scared and we start thinking, man, this investing thing doesn't work and I don't like this and oh my goodness, I have to get out of here. And then we sort of rinse and repeat. What I think frustrates me so much is I think a lot of investors think of this as sort of binary, pass and fail.
Yeah.
I'm either at the top or I'm at the bottom. I'm either at the top or I'm at the bottom. While that may be true for your emotions, that may be how your emotions swing during an investment cycle, that's not actually the way that the markets work. It's a very different picture.
Yeah, it's definitely appealing to that fear component where you're thinking, you know what, I worked hard for that dollar. I don't want to lose that dollar. I heard somebody on social media say it goes up and down. So I've got to choose the right time to get in and out of this because I don't want to be at the up and then ride it all the way down. The reality is, guys, it's cycle of market emotions in an ever-expanding, growing economy. And we wanted to show you this. We actually had a visual. I had Daniel pull it. We just took the S&P 500 from 2000 to 2022. So it's a 22-year period here. And look up this. When I give the visual or I try to describe the walk up a mountain with a yo-yo, yes, that yo-yo, you're throwing it up and down. But over time, as the pizza pie of the economy expands and grows through innovation and companies getting bigger and better, you can profit off of that because you can see all the peaks and valleys. And I had Daniel put the roller coaster icon on there for those that can't see. But you notice it's like the hills that the roller coaster is going up keep getting higher and higher. So this is not, it's like Bo said, it's not a binary. You're at 0 or 1, 0 or 1. This thing, it goes from 0, 1, down to a half, up to 2, down to 2.5 to 3. I mean, it just keeps riding up and down. But over time, you're on much higher ground because the economy is expanding.
Now, what I think is really interesting, Brian, is people are saying, oh, right now it feels frothy, it feels overheated, things look good. In full disclosure, we have no idea what the markets are going to do over the next year, next 18 months, next 2 years. They could go up, they could go down, we don't know. But I think it's interesting. If we look at history, Brian, you were managing money back in 2000, the beginning of where this chart starts.
Yep.
I bet things there at the late 90s felt pretty good, right? .coms were banging,
irrational exuberance,
things
a little
were
frothy.
Good. So suppose you were someone who got really excited because everything was doing good and you started investing right in 2000. The next few years did not feel awesome to you. It was not a great time. But don't you know that person that started investing in 2000 and stayed the course, they're doing pretty good right now. What about 2007, immediately before the Great Recession, before the housing downturn, before 08, 09, if you decided that was your starting point, I'm going to start investing right now. Yeah, it was painful for those next couple of years, but you stretch out and look at the last decade that we've had, it is a very different picture. So if you're someone thinking about investing right now, thinking about getting started, you're like, oh man, what if the market goes down next year? What if the market goes down in the next 2 years? I would encourage you to think, no, not what's going to happen in the next 1 to 2 years. What will the market look like 20 years from now? And do I want to be someone who's on that ride, or do I want to be somebody who's sitting on the sidelines trying to get the timing just right?
Yeah, I'd always be buying. I mean, that's the big thing, is just drive through it, take my Days of Thunder, experience is that, no matter what's going on out there, what the news media is trying to scare you with, you're going to be okay because you're just going to always be buying. And now we talked about the fear side of this. The greed side is also a behavioral thing you'll need to work through, because a lot of us are like, we don't want to be average. I mean, so many videos that we've reacted to or responded to is just like, don't be average. Don't be like everybody else. You want to outperform. Don't be a sucker. But I always say, why do they never give us the facts? Tell people the truth. Be transparent. We love index funds and ETFs because buying this ever expanding economy through innovation can actually be very profitable to your wealth building journey.
Yeah, if we look at the data from Spiva, they run a study determining how often do active managers outperform their index. How often they just outperform the market. And here's what they found. If you look at the US large cap space, think like S&P 500, almost 88% of active managers underperform the index.
Over a 15-year period.
Over a 15-year period. 88% of folks who say, I'm going to do this professionally, aren't able to beat the market. If you look in the mid-cap space, it's about 82%. In the small-cap space, it's about 82%. And in the international space, it's also about 88%. So rather than trying to outsmart yourself, and rather than trying to be greedy and be the top performer and pick the top performing fund, we would argue, hey, focus more on your asset allocation. How am I spreading out my risk across my investments? And there's nothing wrong with just buying the market and being the market, because over the long term, it tends to work out pretty well for investors.
And that's probably a great reminder in light of the year we're starting in 2022, is there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on, that's scary, because when you have wars and conflict and battles where you see death, destruction, it's scary. And then you see, we're dealing with inflation, which we haven't dealt with something like this since the late 70s, early 80s. It can breed a lot of uncertainty. So the last clip we had was from the Black Panther. And is the title fully The Black Panther or just Black Panther? Because I'm old enough that I put the in front of everything. But this is from 2018.
It's like the Facebook or the Kroger's.
And this is what I do like, because this is a serious clip, especially when you have so much craziness, crisis going on. This is probably a good clip to bring it back.
More connects us than separates us. But in times of crisis, the wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. We must find a way.
So, I mean, look, first of all, couldn't we all just use a little help from our friends on reconciliation? Because the last few years have been so crazy. You guys know we don't do politics, we don't do religion on the show, and that's on purpose. That's deliberate because it feels like it's coming from all these different angles. So I loved how this clip talked about reconciliation, but then let's focus on how you don't fall into traps or build barriers in moments of crisis, and you want to build bridges through it like a successful person would, because there's a lot of ways that if you think about in moments of crisis, it's an easy way for you to fall in the financial ditch. We need to keep you protected. And the first thing I think about, Bo, is like emergency reserves.
Yep, that's exactly right. We know this stat, and this is from Bankrate.com, that 56% of Americans have a less than $1,000 in savings. So if you have a medical emergency, a car thing, a house thing, a kid thing, they could not come up with $1,000. Well, if you're thinking about trying to be able to build bridges in times of crisis, it is very, very difficult to do that if you don't have your safe money, if you don't have your emergency money in place. So one of the best ways that you can prepare for uncertainty or scary times, not if they come, but when they come, is to make sure that you have a healthy and robust emergency reserve in place.
There's also, I always get this moments of crisis. One of the easiest tools, it looks like it's really a mirage. And the fact that it's the easiest way to get across this obstacle you have, but it truthfully is a very shaky bridge that turns into a huge trap for you, is debt.
Yep.
I mean, because one of the biggest things I think about, you hear about the latte effect and people worried about consumption of little things. Where I see people really run into issue, not only on consumption, we'll talk about that, but it's some of the bigger purchases like vehicles.
Absolutely.
I mean, and this is a shock and awe moment when I saw the monthly cost of owning a vehicle. And it's not, and with all the inflation and everything, this has even gotten harder. But look at how big this has gotten for the typical person.
Yeah, what's really, really interesting is when you kind of break it down, the average, this is according to Credit Karma, Bankrate, and AAA, the average auto loan payment in this country right now is about $609. Well, you have to layer on top of that car insurance, which for the average American right now costs $89 a month. We know that gas prices are up. So fuel costs for the average consumer, average American right now is $232 a month. And then you have maintenance of about $100 a month across various things. So if you think about the average American driver in this country right now, they're spending over $1,000 a month to own and drive a vehicle.
And then it's not only the vehicles, because I know it's easy because it goes back to that faking it before you make it. And you just want reliable transportation. As you need to be in a phase of your life where you're not trying to get the wow factor. You're just trying to get the reliable factor of getting where you need to be. But there is some consumption, because I gave you guys a pass. I said it's the big life decisions. But let's focus on just the adding up the little stuff of credit cards. We know that the typical credit card of a person who carries a credit card balance is around $5,600. We had Daniel go a step further with what does that look like on a monthly payment side?
And I want to remind you, this is the average person that carries a credit card balance, not someone who's using it as a tool and paying it off monthly. This is a person who's actually incurring interest charges, carrying a balance. It comes out to about $5,700. And the average monthly interest rate on credit cards right now is a little over 20%.
Oh, goodness.
20.5%. So when you break that down, the average American on a monthly basis is spending about $73 in principal to pay off that loan and about $97 in interest, because they often pay the minimum payment. So they're spending $170 a month on a minimum payment, with $97 of that going to interest. If you're someone perpetrating that behavior, it is going to be so difficult to actually start building wealth, because you are just throwing that money away. This is not something helping you build a bridge. This is in fact a true barrier to your long-term wealth building.
Yeah, so be very careful of debt. I've always used the analogy of treat it like you're using a chainsaw. If you have credit card debt, you shouldn't even be firing up the chainsaw, because we tell you can use credit cards, but you can't have credit card balances. That credit card debt is just so detrimental. It's basically like using a chainsaw with a blindfold. Do not use tools like credit cards if you don't have the discipline to handle them effectively. And that's this, by the way, we could expand this to student loan debt and other things, mortgage debt. Be very careful of all debt decisions. But I'm also, when we talk about moments of crisis, Bo, I couldn't help but think about there's another party in the room that has a huge impact on your wallet and your decision making, and that's the media. And you would think, hey, the media, the better advice they give or the most transparent or the most balanced, that would probably be good so I can make good decisions. That's not true. We know that what sells is fear. Scaring you, because they don't get paid for the health of your wallet. They get paid based upon the advertising or the clicks, the views, who's out there tuning in. And as a result, we have the age-old question, can the media even predict what the financial markets are going to do?
It certainly doesn't look like it if you look at headlines. Again, all the way from the Great Recession, 2009, until 2022, it seems like every quarter, every month, every year, there's a headline predicting the next scary thing that's going to happen. Uh-oh, watch out. Uh-oh, be careful. Uh-oh, this is coming. And yet, when you look behind the scenes and you actually see what the economy's been doing, what the market has been doing, it has been expanding. So if you're someone who follows the lead of the media and makes your investment and wealth building decisions based off the headlines, I'm not sure that you're going to be moving in the right direction. So in times of crisis, when things get scary, when things get uncomfortable, be careful who you let in your head, because oftentimes those people are barrier builders. They are not bridge builders.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much money has been lost trying to time the market versus just being the time in the market. I mean, that's a famous quotes on that. Don't count on the media to be your friend or your resource to tell you when you should be making behavioral decisions. There's a huge conflict of interest for them.
So, Brian, what I love is, we started the show. I love movies. I love movies. And I think superhero movies are fantastic. But hopefully you've seen, you don't have to be a superhero. You don't have to have some special power to make superhero-like financial decisions that can really blow you away, to where your future self, 10, 20, 30, 40 years will be like, holy cow, that person making that decision 20 years ago, they were the true superhero.
I do disagree a little bit in the fact that I think we have a Mr. Miyagi moment here.
Okay.
Is that, just like you see all the commercials and all the clips that have made Karate Kid famous with the wax on, wax off, I do want you guys to develop the superpower of being a financial mutant. Okay. It's just like, you didn't get bitten by a spider, you didn't get gamma radiation, but if you exercise your financial mutant muscles enough, you can see opportunity while everybody else is panicked. That whole Warren Buffett, be fearful when others are greedy, greedy when others are fearful. You can also become more disciplined where you're saving. We are giving you the resources. This is the abundance cycle fulfilled. This is why we are your Professor Xavier for you to start becoming that X-Men of finances so you can build more money, know what's coming in the journey. We can be that just wisdom that you look for to know you're making the right decisions.
And if you want to add some tools to your tool belt, go check out our website, moneyguy.com/resources. Go check out learn.moneyguy.com if you want to know some of our super secret weapons that you can use to take your finances to the next level. And we're going to be here and going to continue to load you up with financial advice.
I feel like in that last closing, I just try to throw in let's just go ahead and say Obi-Wan Kenobi. We'll just throw in every mentor of every superhero or fantastical movie franchise there ever was. But I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Obi-Wan Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.